and welcome. Welcome, Homeschool Mama. I am so glad you had time to join me today. We are going to manage our time and our expectations in our homeschool. And from one homeschool mama to another, I know how much we want to just milk all of the energy and the excitement that we have for our child's education, for this lifestyle that we have so many freedoms. We have so much opportunity in this lifestyle for us and for our kids. And I've learned you only have 24 hours in the day. Whether you're a homeschool mom, whether you're not a homeschool mom, no matter what you do, you have 24 hours in the day. Now, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Teresa, and I am the homeschool life coach here in the Homeschool Mama Support Group. And you can find me at capturingthecharmlife.com. And you will know that I am the self-labeled queen of unrealistic expectations because, and you have evidence for this, my website's name is Capturing the Charmed Life. And there was a point at which I decided I should probably change that name because I'm never going to fully capture the charmed life. And yet, I think we all want the charmed life, and we certainly do go into this homeschool lifestyle to enjoy our lives a little more. And yet, those challenges are real, and we work towards making those challenges our charms, but we can't always have the charmed life. That I subconsciously maybe named my website Capturing the Charmed Life is your sign that I am indeed the queen of unrealistic expectations. And I might add, and my family will agree, I'm also the queen of not being able to manage my time well because I am really good with the first thing that I want to share with you today about managing our unrealistic expectations and managing our time. But before we get started, before I share some of the principles around how you can release yourself from that unrealistic mismanagement, I want to ask you, why would you choose to join a class on unrealistic expectations in your homeschool? So maybe you want to grab your journal, because you'll notice that when you're working with me, I'll always ask you to grab your journal or to do a little self-reflection. What would be the reason that you would join a class about unrealistic expectations and mismanagement of your time? So I'll give you a minute or so to write that down. Probably the first thing we think of is one of possibly many challenges that we might have in relation to time and expectation. I've learned when I sit and have a chat with someone one-on-one that the reason that they come for a conversation with me, a clarifying conversation, is not usually for that specific reason. They think it is. Just like me. If I go to my coach and I say, let's have a chat, I would love to talk about this thing, and I would love to resolve this thing that's going on in my head or this uncertainty. It usually isn't that reason. There's another thing going on. But first thoughts are really important. So what was the thing that you first thought of in this mismanagement of time and expectations? If you'd throw it in the comment section, or you can DM me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, so I don't know if you've already seen this, but I have been putting this around in different places, on Instagram, on Facebook, in my email community, is an opportunity to use a time audit. Because as I was saying, I was very unrealistic early in my homeschool. I wanted to have a private school in my home. I figured if the private school can do it, I could do it better. I could dabble in things that our private school locally wasn't even doing, like Latin or upper level logical, um, a logic based critical, I forget what we're calling it, but like some logic related concepts or upper level math that we could incorporate in the lower level. We were doing all sorts of different languages. And, if you name a subject, and I probably was touching on it at some point in the first 8 or 9 years of my homeschool. And that was just the homeschool. So I had ideas about what my home would look like. It would be tidy and it would be clean. Always. Because it made me uncomfortable when it wasn't like that. I expected that my kids would still be dressed beautifully, that they'd be up at a certain time in the morning, that they'd be ready to do their studies, that they'd know how to use the daytime rooms, preferably with nice little colored markers, and they'd have everything organized, that they knew to do the top 5 things right off the top of the morning. Make their bed, brush their teeth, get on clothes. We don't want to keep the same pajamas. At least change your pajamas today or change your underwear. Now I forget what the other 5 are, or the other 2 are. But we would always have the top 5. Go do the top 5. I'll meet you back in the kitchen, 8 o'clock. You can have breakfast, 8:30. We'll do circle time. Then between 9 and 9:15, we did one activity. Then we'd move to the next, the next, and the next. And by 12, we will have finished our entire Charlotte Mason-based approach to our mornings, take an hour break, including lunch, including running around outside, and then come back to do our read aloud on the couch, which would be an hour-long read aloud for an 8 and a 6-year-old. And I also had a 5-year-old and a baby, or a toddler at that point. We'd read for an hour. I would expect my kids to dictate or to narrate back what they were doing if they were really young, not the toddler. And my oldest 2 would write a page about what they read. And then we would do science experiments. Then we would go to extracurricular activities, a lot of them. I expected to do all of them. If it sounded cool, we should do it. If we could afford it, we would do it. And then we'd come home, have dinner, make dinner, because I want to teach the kids how to cook. And it didn't matter how old they were. We did actually cook together, and they also happened to like that part. They didn't like the cleanup part. But we would also clean up together. And then we would prep for bedtime, and we do another read aloud. Okay, can you see the picture of unrealistic expectation here? This is just my family life. So I've explained to you my homeschool, my family life, but there's an element of my family life I didn't tell you about. And it is, I expected that everybody would want to do the fun things and the cool life that I had planned. And also that nobody would introduce some complaining, bickering, squabbling, time disorganization. We would just do this seamlessly. I didn't even factor in my own emotional reactions to it, or the monthly cycle that would most definitely interfere with my general satisfaction of the plan. And then when I started writing, and I started writing intentionally, professionally, I expected to build in time for me, which was super useful for me to take a breather, fuel up, even if it was just 15 minutes or so a day. And once a week on Wednesday evenings, I would go to Starbucks and get 2 hours away. I expected to do that and to do it with ease and with peace. You can imagine that I didn't. Imagine how it would feel. Now, I would love to hear what your story is. Perhaps how you approach your homeschool, your life, all of the different details really aren't what I just described. And you have a very different picture of why you mismanage your time or you mismanage your expectations. I'd like to hear about your story. Nonetheless, the outcome is very similar. It's dissatisfying. Very dissatisfying. Sometimes it feels crazy making, like there's just too much going on. We're moving this way and that way. We have to help this child do cursive. We have to have that child do their math thing. We need this kid to stop eating off the floor. Just all the things all at once. It's a lot. It's not satisfying. Okay, so I've painted my story. I'd love to hear what your story is as well. So you can DM me or throw a comment in the comment section. So the first thing that I want to introduce as a tool that you could use to address some of this, we want to say, just be realistic. I want to say, let's be realistic. What does that mean? The first thing that we can do is actually a time audit. Write down everything that we do every day, whether it's eating, sleeping, using the washroom, writing, texting, on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you are, whatever you do, write it down. And yes, I know that right there sounds overwhelming, but if you can do that for 1 week, this will truly blow up your unrealistic expectations, because you will realize you do not have that much time. Let's just assume you need 6 to 8 hours of sleep. So immediately you've lost 6 to 8 hours at night. Assume that you are going to have to deal with your child's big emotions. You're going to have to deal with sibling conflict and helping them learn how to interact with each other. And you're also going to have to deal with your big emotions and your triggers, because you and your kids are human, and this is a human experience. And so you're actually going to want to have to plan time, flexible time, to deal with those things. But if you download the time audit that's connected to, it'll probably be in the comments section down below, you are going to have a tool that seems super simple, but if you record everything you do for 1 week, I want you to take a look at it at the end of the week and discover what amount of time you're using for things that really don't matter. Look at the things that matter to somebody else but don't necessarily matter to you. And then look at the things that really matter to you that you must keep. And also look at the things that really matter to your kids that you must keep. And then learn to build in buffer time, because you need buffer time. Spoken from the gal who always assumes that 4 kids should be ready at 2:45 so that we can get to town in 10 minutes, even though it is officially 17 minutes, and everybody will be happy doing it. So I've learned that you have to put in a buffer, time or space in between the activity you're intending to go to and the activity just finished. And that also stands for not just extracurriculars, but also for all the activities that you're doing in the day. If anything is prescribed whatsoever, you need 5, 15, whatever amount of time every time. Perhaps you know, more importantly, that a certain child has a very difficult time getting somewhere or planning for something or being emotionally available to something, then include that as a buffer time. So that time audit helps you to prioritize, but your goal is to feel satisfied in your homeschool and your homeschool life, which means that your goal is to be present. So we want to practice presence. It's something that I discuss a lot, is mindfulness exercises, in order for us to get a whole lot more present in our lives. Excuse me. So one of the things that you can do is grab your device and put into the alarm an alarm at probably the most intensely triggering moment of your day. For me, it was 11 a.m. Monday mornings, most weeks. By that point, I could see that most of my plans were not happening the way that I wanted them to. And the kids' energy matched that. And they felt the intensity, the expectation that I had. They weren't always wanting to do exactly what I said. They certainly didn't want to do it with the kind of intensity that I was putting into it. And so that was a moment that I felt incredibly intense. So I would put in my device, 11 a.m. every day, an alarm that would go off to tell me to stop, to breathe, ask myself, how am I feeling? What's going on? in the last 5 minutes or hour or morning? What have been my thoughts that have been going on in here over the course of the morning? And what's the story that I've been telling myself about those thoughts? These kids don't want to do what I'm doing. Why don't they want to do what I'm doing? I'm planning all this fun stuff for them, or all this stuff that's so important to help them have a strong education, to have a broad education. I'm putting so much effort into this. They should surely want to be doing this right now. Or you fill in the blank. I had many variations over the course of time. And at 11 a.m. every day, I could do another assessment and ask myself, how am I feeling? What's going on right now? What's my thoughts? What have been the story of thoughts over the course of the morning? That right there does two things for me. It helps me be present, be right in the moment, and say, I'm okay right now. A little self-soothing with that breath, and with someone, me, attending to me and saying, I see you. I feel for where you're at right now. Let's talk about that. And it helps me to stop this constant narrative that's going on here and just say, be here now, which is a very useful tool when we are homeschooling, because most people think that as homeschoolers we're always with our kids. And though it would appear that for a good chunk of their earlier homeschool lives we are with them, we are not always with them. Can I hear an amen? We are not always with them. And of course we're not always physically with them either, but we are often with them, but we are not always eyeball to eyeball. We're not always present. And that is definitely a goal, is for us to be present, because it is so much more satisfying. I was alluding to this in the Instagram live this morning, that at the end of our homeschool days, we will be supreme multitaskers, capable of superhero feats in multitasking. But the research says that it doesn't actually help you, that you actually aren't more productive, and you certainly are not more happy, and you aren't getting as much done. So if that be the case, then that's not the goal. It's still an inevitability, because there are always, a few things going on at the same time when you have younger kids, and even when you have older kids, but definitely when your kids are younger. So our goal isn't multitasking. Try to be right here, right now, which I might add means that you have to learn to put your phone away or the computer away during certain times. Now, if you do a formal homeschool approach, you put it away at that time. You turn off the ringer off the landline or your cell phone or whatever, and let the family know that you're not available. And you also tell yourself, Instagram is not available to you right now. Another thing that you can do is, the second thing that I would add is to actually do a little values audit. So after you've done this time audit over the course of a week, you're looking at the things that you've done over the last week. You need to sleep. You need to exercise to burn off stress. You need to do something that is outside of your home, your homeschool altogether, even if it's just 15 minutes, and go for a walk around the block, but disconnect, really helpful for your relationship and for your overall long-term satisfaction in homeschool. You need to build relationships that are not with your children. So that could be a significant other, that could be a friend, somebody outside of your home. You need to do all the basic self-care type things, but you also need to do things inside your home, like your homeschool, doing things that are of interest to you. So you're not the only one at the homeschool table that isn't learning or interested in what you're doing. You want to maintain long-term satisfaction in your homeschool, so be learning things you want to be learning now too. What other things would you add that you definitely need to do in the course of a week? You need sometimes just to entertain. You need to turn on Netflix or whatever streaming service or YouTube or something just to be entertained for a little bit. You need to plan, I'm going to stop there. You've got a lot of things that you need to do. And then there are some things that you have practiced over the course of your life to do that you don't need to do. Those are the things that other people want you to do that aren't valuable to you, that you don't see the value in them, but you feel compelled to do them because someone's asking you. So is there a way to approach that and address that boundary challenge that you might have with that person or that institution and say, I appreciate you, I care about you, I don't see things the same way as you do. And then take that thing off your list. In a homeschool family life, over the course of a decade, 2 decades, maybe just a few years, whatever you're doing, you need a lot of buffer space for you to breathe, to process what's going on, and to practice being present. So you're going to evaluate your values and your priorities at the end of that week. One of the things, as I'd said, that I had as a priority was a clean home. And it looks pretty clean right there. But that's because it's staged. Okay, it's been like that for a long time and it is my general style, but no one is ever in here unless it is me and someone else on that side of the room. So it never gets touched. Whereas if you look at my Instagram live this morning, you'll see on the floor a whole bunch of papers because I'm a writer, I'm a creator, and I always have ideas pouring out onto paper, and they're on the floor. And I don't put that in the video. And if you go take a look at my kitchen right now, when my second daughter left home in September, the dishes cleanup or the kitchen cleanup shifted so that I was on the roster again. And that means I haven't done the dishes yet. And there are quite a few dishes on the counter waiting to be washed and dried and put away eventually. And once upon a time, that would have made me nuts. I have had so many conversations with so many homeschool moms about how the lack of cleanliness, the lack of order makes you feel a little crazy. And I get that. There was a moment in this room even that I was sweeping the room very unhappily about 7 or so years ago. And I was so unhappy that everyone knew it. And my husband came to me and said, "What's up?" And I said, "I don't want to sweep the floor anymore." And he said, "Then don't do it." Now, he was being rather risky at this moment because I was actually premenstrual. So he says, "Don't do it." And I said, "Don't do it." Well, who is going to do it? Because no one is going to do it, right? I'm going to do it, so I will do it. And he said, "Could you consider doing it differently?" Really walking into interesting territory there. Well, in the moment, he surprised me because he doesn't usually approach me like that when I'm in that energy. And it dawned on me, I don't have to do it. But who else is going to do it? So I'm going to have to do it. And he said, "What about deciding to do it with the same energy or joy as you do when you are reading something with the kids on the couch, or when you're writing something, or when you're going for a hike?" I guess I might have to do that. Of course, I wasn't quickly persuaded, but over the course of time, I realized actually that's the thing. If these things are important, like sweeping or washing dishes or doing all those things, if they're actually important, then decide to be present in them, or slip in earbuds and listen to my podcast, but decide to be present with them and decide to be satisfied doing it. Okay, so that's what I did. I decided I am going to enjoy sweeping. Ish. Okay, I can do that, But I can't do that every day or 3 times a day when it needs it. Right, okay. So that's the thing. I stopped doing it every day or 3 times a day at that point. And I still don't do it 3 times a day. But I stopped doing it so often. You are going to have a mess at home if you are homeschooling. You will have more of a mess at home when you're homeschooling. You're going to have science experiments on the kitchen counter, and you're going to think it's food. And then you're going to realize after someone's chomped into it, it's not food, it wasn't edible. Or you're going to have so many more slippery, sticky messes because kids are sampling or cooking in the kitchen. Or it's not just the kitchen. There's every room of your house gets used for something, somehow, some way, and it's a mess. It is a part of homeschooling. If that is not your homeschool life, frankly, I'll just say straight, if you don't have a little bit of untidiness or mess in your homeschool, you might be spending too much time cleaning and not enough time being with the kids. My very favorite person when my kids were a lot younger was so engaged with her kids, so engaged with my kids. Her house was a disaster. I think the two are connected or linked. Now, to get comfortable with it being a mess, right? That's the tricky thing. Because it is tricky. It feels messy in here when it's messy out here. It's true. And yet, you can't always be cleaning. So decide when you're going to clean. Do it then. Have the kids join you. I'm a big proponent of everybody doing something, doesn't matter how old you are, unless you can't walk. And everybody joins together to do it on whatever day or whatever hour or whatever 20 minutes and however you want to do it once a week. The dishes might have to be a little more regular unless you do paper plates. Okay, so rendering this notion of a clean home. Tell me what you think. The other thing, I know we all are not doing an education, a home education the way that I did it. I do know that there are plenty of people that do, though. Our expectations of how we're going to actually do the homeschool stuff or how we're going to engage our kids in their learning directly tied to how we think about what an education is anyway. So get really clear on what you think an education is, and then you can ask yourself, does what I think about what an education is directly link to how we are doing it every day and how I'm speaking to the kids about their studies or their extracurriculars or your read aloud or whatever it is you're doing with them. So decide, really do an assessment to ask yourself, is what I'm actually doing consistent with how I think about what an education is? This is something that I speak about a lot because it was kind of mind-blowing for me with all the early reading I did on John Taylor Gatto and John Holt and all of the folks on my Homeschool Mama reading list. It was a huge shift in how I was approaching my children's home education. It was a powerfully freeing shift. And not just because I wanted the freedom, but because I realized they really aren't learning the way that I thought they should be learning. And it turns out my construct was faulty, not how I was approaching my kids' education, but the entire construct of how I thought about how they could learn was not accurate with reality, who my kids really were. So of course, if you want to learn more about that, or if you want to do a deep dive into deschooling, you can check my website, capturingthecharmlife.com. Just put in the search bar deschool and you will see all sorts of things. I also offer group coaching for deschooling. So the other thing that you want to really look at is your life vision. Who are you outside your homeschool mom role? Because one day they will grow up. I remember people saying that, and I remember thinking, could it happen tomorrow? Because I'm really tired. No, probably not. But they do, and my kids have. My oldest is 21, still doing Latin and ancient history and psychology and philosophy and things in university. And my third daughter is in a ballet program at a fine arts degree or across the country. My third, I said that was my second daughter, and my third daughter is graduating high school this year, and my fourth is my son, and he is just entering his grade 9 year. And that is surreal for me because I thought I would stay in that underslept, young child demanding homeschool era forever, and it turns out that's not how it works. They grow up. So if they grow up, then the question is, who are you outside of the homeschool mom? Who are you outside of the mom role? So you know that you're not going to be educating the neighbor's kids or your grandchildren, although I do know those people. But you are going to be doing something else. And so what is the something else? Who are you outside of your mother role? And I really don't think that we're not clear on that until it really happens. And even in my scenario right now where I'm gradually moving out of the mom role, I know that I'm not fully in that either. But I do know that most mothers are closely connected to how they engage their kids, and they very much are invested in being the best moms that we can be and to show up on purpose with our kids. And that's a lot of energy, and that's a giant identity that is not just you, because whoever you are is a person with interests, with a reason to be here on this earth, entirely outside of the role of mother. So we need to explore what that identity is as well in order for us to get clear on our values or our priorities and start building in time even for those things. Even if it's in a really small way, just begin to build in time. Okay, so I talked about ultimately being present, getting clear on our values and our priorities. I think sometimes we just need a good old-fashioned reality check, though. And remember what I said earlier about doing a time audit and discovering what you're actually doing in a day and understanding how much time you can spend doing all the things? Well, you have 24 hours in a day. And when you discover how much time you're investing in all the things that, yeah, TikTok's fun, but you just don't need that much screen time candy as much as you might be investing, or Netflix, or really, you fill in the blank. It could be knitting. Is it knitting? Anybody? Are you over knitting? Okay, whatever you're doing, it could be other things, but you only have 24 hours in a day. The other reality check is that, and this one to this day does not work for me. My big emotions and my kids' big emotions, or my husband sometimes, are big emotions interfering with the plan of our day. I remember writing a post called "And Then There Are Those Days." I remember writing it because I remember feeling just done and tired, just unhappy waking up in the morning. My two older girls came up to my bed and are like, "Mom, are we going to homeschool today?" And that was the kind of energy that day was. I barely could get my head off the pillow. I really needed coffee, but I needed more than coffee. I needed to just reevaluate everything that I was doing and how I was doing it, because I wasn't enjoying it. And I would, of course, later understand that was probably around the same time, a week or so before my period, when my emotions were dipping in a way that they were characteristically dipping at that time. That as a homeschool mom, we need to actually write on the calendar when our next predicted cycle is. Really. There's something you haven't maybe heard anybody say before, but it's really important, because then you can look at that and say, okay, so a week, a few days, maybe more of time before that time hits, I'm not going to feel my best. I'm not going to think that this is the bestest life I could be living right now. I'm more likely to see the things that are not working. I'm more likely to be caught up in conflict or struggle or whatever it is for you. We all experience that differently. But for me, I look back and realized, oh, that was what was going on at that time, is that I was not spending time on me and asking myself, how am I going to address this monthly repeating event in my life so that I had the energy to show up in my homeschool on purpose. But there's so many reasons why we could be having one of those days. So many. I was just talking to a mom today who is in an especially challenging scenario where her husband is, how do I say this? He has a chronic illness that could be, a life thing. Whether he could live or die, they don't really know. And so she's in a scenario where she still has a homeschooled kid. She has had many months, 2 years now, of dealing with this very large issue that hasn't been healed, and yet nothing particularly life-altering has happened, but she's in a really tough place. And I know over the last few years, a lot of people are having those experiences after a couple years of too much going on in the whole world. So if that's you, you're going to have a whole bunch more of those days. And our expectation of how much energy we have to show up in that should be less. And if you're me, it wasn't, because it didn't matter that I was having one of those days. I should still be able to show up exactly how I want to every single day. And that's just not realistic. Our big emotions, our kids' big emotions, or our partner's big emotions, the people that are the most important in our world, when they have those big emotions, we need space to address them. Buffer time. Yes, and the one other reality check that I would say is this, that when you become a parent, and not even when you're a homeschool parent, but when you're a parent, you sign up for growth. You just didn't know it. I did not know it. I really did not know it. So, but as a homeschool parent, you get more opportunities for growth. Can I say that in a nicer way? Anyways, some days are going to be really hellish. That's what I'm saying. And yet, you're signing up for growth. There is therefore a requirement to build in buffer time for processing that growth, or for deciding how to approach it or deal with something. And when we expect that this life isn't seamless and that we'll go through seasons that are actually not easy at all, then we have to, we have more peace when we know that we are in a growth trajectory, that is life, that we are always going to be going toward growth, that our children are always growing, that the most important people in our world are always growing. So however you construct the routine in your homeschool, however you think that your life should be right now, and it isn't. Except this one thing, that it isn't going to always be what it is right now, and it wasn't always going to be the way you thought it should be, but it will always be growth. So I've gone over my 30 minutes for sure, but there's two other things I want to say, and so I'm going to say them a lot quicker, even though I could not. So the first one, or the fourth thing that I'd say, is to acknowledge who's influencing you, because who we allow to influence our thoughts has a big impact on how we show up in our lives, or how we decide to think about our lives. I've had a lot of writing discussion about our influencers. It's why I do the Homeschool Mama book club, because the books that we read are influencing how we think, whether it's about our homeschool directly. Next month we're going to talk about Kara S. Anderson's book, More Than Enough. and she is a homeschool mom that talks about that exact point. Are we more than enough as homeschool moms? And we've talked about all sorts of other books over the course of time that aren't directly related to homeschooling. They might be about, anyways, I'll let you look at that. I'll try to make this faster. I've essentially encouraged you to acknowledge who your influencers are, write it down. Who are the most important people in your world, the ones that you spend the most time with. They are influencing you the most. And if there is a specific social media account, or there is a specific author or a coach or a counselor or somebody, those people are influencing you the most. Do you want them to be influencing you the way that you're being influenced? And if you are specifically challenged with one of those people, then that might be a boundary challenge that you're addressing. Just today, I'm putting together a building boundaries checklist, and so that I can actually give that to you next month. And so next month, we're going to have a class on building boundaries. And so the last thing that I have to say is, what is impeding your ability to be present after this conversation? After you have been listening to me this far, what is the thing that is most influencing you to be less present in your homeschool or in your life? If you want to talk with me directly about that, you can join me on, I'll give you a link. I'll just send you a link. You and I can have a conversation, a clarifying conversation, so that you can get a lot clearer on what you're addressing, but also a perspective shifting conversation, because oftentimes we don't even know what's going on in here. We don't have clarity on it because we don't have someone deeply listening to what's going on in here. And so I'm not a mind reader, but if you and I are sitting together and you share this thing and you say, this is really important, and then you say, but this thing too, and I can ask you, okay, so these two things, how are they connected? Why do they both matter at the same time? Or is there a part of you that wants this and a part of you that wants this? Let's talk about those parts. When do these parts first want something? How are they canceling each other out? And what is it that all the parts want? Or how can we integrate all the parts? So those are some of the things that we would do in a clarifying, perspective shifting conversation. Okay, well, I don't want to take too much more of your time because I know how valuable it is, and you've got stuff to clean up off the floor now. Okay, so I'd love to hear from you. So let me know in DMs or in comments how I can support you and what you've been able to garner or what kind of insights you've gained from this time together. So for the rest of the week, I hope you and your kids can turn your homeschool challenges into your homeschool charms. Have a great week.